Now on BBC2, tonight's edition of Europe on the Brink is a drama set in the year 2013. The unthinkable is about to happen. Europe and America are about to go to war.
What are the forces that will shape the Europe of the 21st century? The dateline is 2 decades from now, the year 2013. Everything that follows is by definition fictional. It's the television equivalent of those exercises in geopolitical stargazing so favoured by governments and think tanks. The scenario for this one was drawn up with the help of one such research institute. These are not predictions, but what's depicted in the film is at least a plausible outcome of events that are already happening.
There are unconfirmed reports of activity by vessels of the Euro Federation Navy in the Arctic area.
Europe has got to withdraw its forces. Otherwise, we cannot be held responsible for the consequences.
The North American Union President, Hector Gonzalez, has ordered the 6th Fleet to proceed full speed to the Arctic.
Air raid warning red. Air raid warning red.
Si les Américains ont de doutes sur nos résultats, si nous devons nous battre, nous sommes prêts et déterminés.
Sources close to the European government in the Reichstag say the Charlemagne division has successfully occupied 2 islands in the autonomous area of northern Quebec.
If the president gives me the order, sure, I'll press that button. That's my job.
2 CAF in the vicinity of West Frew Airfield are engaging.
In Berlin, a senior English minister of the European government has resigned.
An unchallenged government with so much power, it often doesn't know which hand is doing what. And now, they want to lead us into a suicidal war.
Government ministers have been coming in and out of the Reichstag building all evening, but none was prepared to say what had been discussed or whether there had been any communication with Washington.
The struggle for oil reserves in the Arctic region has precipitated a major crisis amongst the 3 superpowers. Opposition members in Westminster have called for an emergency debate over the growing crisis. Both sides, the European Federation and the North American bloc, are reported to be seeking 11th-hour negotiations as their forces draw closer to confrontation.
It's now nearly a century since the outbreak of the first of the 2 world wars that redrew the map of Europe and laid the foundations for European Union. After 70 years of peace, Europe once more finds itself confronting global conflict. But this time, the potential adversary is the North American bloc. The special relationship of the 20th century has deteriorated into antagonism. When presidents and prime ministers pondered the New World Order in the 1990s, they can scarcely have thought of this. So what went wrong?
The history of Europe has been bitterly contested. 20 years ago, the idea of a unified Europe was still in the realms of fantasy.
A dream to some, perhaps, but to others, and they were powerful voices, a nightmare.
I believe that the majority of the British people do not want to hand over substantially more powers to the European community.
Is that what you want? Do you want to be citizens of a European Union?
On the continent, too, opponents of European unity drew massive support. They clung to their belief in the sovereignty of individual nations.
C'est vous, c'est nous, c'est le peuple français qui va décider souverainement, librement, pour lui et pour la France. Vive la France et vive la République!
Sir Brian Donlevy served in the first united European government.
Well, what I think the Eurosceptics, as they were then called, failed to grasp was how much events beyond the control of national governments were to make an integrated Europe not just an important option, but the only way forward. In other words, the cost of not going into Europe really became prohibitive for Europeans.
That cost was made clear in the late 1990s as the world economy fell into a prolonged slump. Instability in the financial markets undermined one European currency after another. Under the strain in 1996, the markets crashed. It was a crisis beyond management by any single nation. Flotsam from this economic shipwreck. Many people lost their livelihoods, their homes.
In Britain, as we then were, the social consequences of 5 million unemployed were quite devastating. Everywhere you looked, you saw people, whole families sometimes, living on the street. Welfare payments were worthless, forcing thousands into begging and petty crime. I think all that profoundly shocked the country, so it came as no surprise to me when the coalition got in 97 on the Euro ticket. People desperately wanted change, an end to mess and misery. And if joining European institutions achieved that, everyone was saying, well, let's get on with it before there's nothing left.
Individually, the European nations were paralyzed. Some form of economic coordination became imperative. The Treaty of Cologne established the European Central Bank modelled on the German Bundesbank. What followed, one currency, one interest rate, one economic policy, was welcomed in most European capitals. The first Eurobank president was a German government minister.
It was always felt in other European capitals that British reluctance to join monetary union was based on an outdated political nostalgia. You know, the mother of parliaments and all that. But it did not match the economic realities of the time. After all, there's not much point in defending your national sovereignty if economic collapse is threatening to pull the whole state apart anyway.
Well, yes. There were some grumbles on the British side, you know. People who said we were losing our identity in some soulless system run by the Germans, as if Hitler had won the war. But it didn't cut much ice, that sort of nonsense. No. The fact was that by dithering along outside Europe for all those years, we'd almost bankrupted ourselves.
Economic and monetary union was, however, no panacea. For some countries, like Italy, it came too late to avert a political crisis. The country was already reeling from a series of brutal austerity programs when the crash of '96 sent the lira into free fall. Within days, in emergency elections, the Lombardy League, a right-wing regional party, had won control of the north of the country. In Rome on September the 5th, 1997, as a protest rally was coming to an end, a powerful bomb went off in a parked car. "53 people were killed, scores more were injured."
The Roma massacre was really a big turning point for Italians, I think. People were shocked. My God, I remember when I heard the news I started to cry. I couldn't help myself. It was so awful, so stupid, so pointless. Of course, there were rumors that the Lombardy League itself had put the bomb there, or the security services, or the mafia, who knows. But the result was the same. It enabled Italians to say, "To hell with Rome, you disgust me. Now we are going to go our own way."
Across Europe, within old nation-states, regions began to flex their political muscles. The Lombardy League declared the north of Italy an independent state. Throughout Europe, nationalism, even fascism, flourished. Always the groups were protesting against the central government, the national government. In Germany, in particular, the protest was met with firm resistance from the authorities. Europe threatened to fragment into smaller states. Many of these smaller regions felt they had more in common with each other than with their own national governments. As a compromise, those governments began to move further to the right. Yet the chaos within Europe's borders was as nothing compared with the environmental and political devastation beyond. By the end of the millennium, Russia itself was disintegrating. The poisoned legacy of communism, the crippled economy, the pollution, the corruption, finally overwhelmed the fumbling attempts at democracy. In the confusion that followed, ethnic rivalries, the time bomb planted by Stalin, erupted into war. On Russia's borders, the republics of the CIS plunged one by one into anarchy. In Russia itself, millions were driven from their homes, a movement of peoples on a scale not seen since the Second World War.
With the replacement of President Yeltsin by outliners, actually, they were old-style communists posing as nationalists, life became very bad in Russia. Jews and other minorities were persecuted, hyperinflation made everybody poor, except, of course, the racketeers. There was even famine in some areas, like under Stalin. This time, nobody tried to stop people, so they voted with their feet. Whole towns and villages were suddenly deserted. I've never seen Moscow so empty, except after the panic caused by the nuclear accident at Smolensk. One day, I went around to see my uncle. His door was open, but the house was empty, all its possessions untouched. A neighbor told me the family just walked away, carrying only suitcases.
They had nowhere to go but west. Millions of Russians, Ukrainians, even refugees from the Caucasus streamed into Eastern Europe. From there they sought entry to the west. Along the German borders, thousands tried to cross illegally at dead of night. German border patrols were increasingly vigilant. Refugee camps could no longer cope with the growing numbers. Aid workers were overwhelmed.
Es ist 0 Grad, die Leute haben keine Heizung, 600 Leute in Zelten, wir haben kein Essen, das Wasser ist zum Teil verseucht, die ganzen Medikamenten sind fast alle, es ist eine reine Katastrophe.
Tens of thousands of refugees made their way to European capitals, even as far as London. They camped in the streets, their care placed enormous strains on a decrepit welfare state. It was an unbearable situation with no sign of resolution. Until political will was suddenly galvanized by a further tragedy.
I got a phone call at 5 a.m. telling me to get to Downing Street as fast as I could. I was a young PPS at number 10 then. When I got there, the cabinet was already in emergency session. During the night, there had been a terrible incident on the German-Polish border at a place called Görlitz, where there was a large refugee camp. Neo-Nazis posing as aid workers had entered and fired indiscriminately into the tents. 94 men, women and children were killed. The feeling round our table was that this refugee crisis, and don't forget, at this point, England alone was dealing with 500,000 asylum seekers. As I say, the feeling was that something had to be done about this crisis. Something big.
And it was. Within a week of the atrocity at Görlitz, national governments had taken the collective decision to erect a wall along Europe's easternmost borders. Its purpose was to fence off a disintegrating Russia. It stretched from Odessa on the Black Sea, northward along the Ukrainian and Belarusian borders, and then skirted the Baltic states, on up to Finland. An iron curtain had once more descended across the continent, but this time it was lowered by the west to keep out the east.
The building of the Ostmauer, the East Wall, was a necessary evil, I would say. Of course, we all of us had some misgivings about it. After all, the Berlin Wall had come down only 11 years before. But the situation was really desperate, you know. I mean, in Amsterdam, we had refugees actually living in theaters, cinemas, and even art galleries. And of course, crime got very much worse. No, I think without the wall, we would have had social anarchy. And actually, it was not like the Iron Curtain at all. Our wall was by popular demand. Our peoples knew it was their only means of surviving.
We Brits, along with the Swedes and Danes, hummed and hawed about it being drastic, but we were won over by promises that some refugees would still be given entry. The French and Spanish wanted a discount from their financial contributions, as they were least affected. But this turned out to be just a tactical ploy. They had major problems themselves with mass migrations from North Africa. So, a year after the East Wall went up, work began on the Maghreb buffer zone along the northern Mediterranean. All in all, a wonderful beginning to the new millennium.
But the predominant mood was exhilaration. The countries of Europe had decided together to build the wall. That complicity gave them the political will to unite. In 2002, the Berlin summit created the first ever pan-European government. 23 European states gave up their principal powers to a central authority drawn from a directly elected parliament.
Oh,
Oh, it was a wonderful feeling after all those years to know that we'd done it. That the shabby pretensions of individual nations were discarded for a far greater destiny. That Europeans might once again lead the civilized world like a new renaissance. It was wonderful.
For Germans, it was a tremendous moment. It meant for the first time that the legacy of the World War, the guilt, the anger, all that could be forgotten. We were great again. But great as a part of Europe. As Thomas Mann said, not a German Europe, but a European Germany.
The Euro-Fed government based itself in the Reichstag in Berlin. There was no escaping the fact that Germany, with its huge population and dominant economy, was the engine for a new united Europe. The administrative task of centralizing the governments of 23 nations was enormous, but events in the Middle East were to haul the world's gaze away from Berlin. A fundamentalist group with powerful backing had detonated a small nuclear device on Saudi Arabian oil fields. The blast was sufficient to destroy oil installations in the east while leaving the holy sites at Mecca untouched. The Americans, preempting any debate by the United Nations, immediately sent forces into the area. Within a week, they were engaged in the Second Gulf War, with disastrous consequences. For the developed world, a primary source of oil was wiped out. America was finally accounted to have won the war. The American casualties numbered 30,000. 2 out of 3 were victims of chemical and radiation poisoning. It was a heavy toll on national pride. A new world order was all too apparent. Throughout the conflict, the Europeans remained neutral. Americans could no longer count on their support. The national reaction was outrage. Congress passed a resolution suspending the American participation in NATO. Without that linchpin, NATO collapsed. By now, America was a very different country from the superpower that had won 2 world wars. The Second Gulf War was a brutal body blow to an already fragile economy. A national debt of several $1 trillion made it the world's largest debtor nation. Yet there was a reluctance to take the very measures that would raise revenue.
Americans think they're different. Now, in any sane democracy, it's taken as normal that you pay taxes. If there's a deficit, maybe even pay extra taxes. Not in America. Not anymore. In fact, taxes has become such a dirty word that you don't even dare condemn those who evade taxes. Hell no, that's screwing the poor, for God's sake. It seems to me that that's a real problem.
Unemployment was rising dramatically. Hardest hit of all were America's growing ethnic communities. Decades of poverty and neglect had soured the American dream for them.
The melting pot worked because there was a dominant cultural ethos, which meant basically white and English speaking. Today, most Americans don't speak English as their first language. Many never learn to speak it at all. And most of these people are loyal, not so much to their new mother country, as earlier immigrants had been, but to their local ethnic communities. Party labels such as Democrat and Republican have ceased to be relevant. People vote for short-term gain and along largely racial lines.
And soon there was a president for that vote, one who could reflect the changing ethnic mix of the nation. In November 2008, the American people elected Hector Gonzalez of Hispanic descent, born and raised in New York. On his inauguration day, he made a bold announcement, the formation of a North American Union between the United States, Mexico, and Canada. French-speaking Quebec had decided to separate from Canada and remain independent. On the question of America's massive debts, Gonzalez warned he would bow to no other superpower.
And let me tell this nation, loud and clear, no country in the world is going to hold us to ransom. We will not become the whipping boys of foreign bankers. No, nunca, nunca, nunca. Sure, we have debts, and we will pay them. But we will do it as we think fit, and at our own pace.
Well, frankly, America today is the only developed nation in the world which thinks like an underdeveloped nation. Sort of standard bearer for the third world. Well, I suppose that's unavoidable now that they've got to consider all those peons down in Mexico, but it really does make it awfully difficult for us to do business with them when they always cast us as the imperialist paper tiger.
Across the globe, Japan was spurred into a massive rearmament program by the growing unrest in neighboring China. It would have seemed inconceivable to earlier generations of Japanese that their country should have armed forces on this scale, but the spectre of militarism was fading as new alignments and threats emerged in the world. Japan's preparations were vindicated. On mainland China, the geriatric leadership had finally crumbled. The north of the country remained stable as Japan exerted its growing military influence to install a sympathetic government in Beijing. In the center, there was civil war, as local leaders from Shanghai wrestled for control. The southern region was dominated by warlords from Hong Kong and Taiwan. China was now a country divided into three.
The Chinese Civil War played a crucial role in making Japan the superpower it is today. Certain things flowed from this. One was that Japan emerged as the chief power broker in the Far East, without question. And in this role, it was respected by the Americans, who in effect allows the Pacific region to become a Japanese sphere of influence. That above all meant that Siberia, which of course is so rich in the natural resources, became accessible to Japan without too much protest from the Americans. But it's a question, of course, whether if the Americans had protested, we would have taken any notice.
The globe now fell into three powerful regional trading blocs, one centered on Japan, the second on the North American Union, and the third on Europe. Member nations in each bloc enjoyed free trade conditions. The European Federation was a single market of 400 million consumers, 1/3 of all world trade.
We always knew that if Europe could unite, it had the population, the capital, the technology and resources to be a major commercial force in the world. If anything, our expectations were surpassed by the reality.
The record was certainly impressive. The effect of unification was to boost economic growth and create new jobs. The super champions of European industry dramatically improved Europe's balance of payments. But the success of the new federation brought its own problems. A string of takeovers created vast European conglomerates. This happened first and most obviously in the airline industry, where Europe Air exercised a virtual monopoly. In the North American Union, national air carriers were under pressure and angry at the threat to their livelihood. Sensitive to their concern, the North American Union imposed restrictions on Europe Air landing rights. In the Euro Federation, agricultural efficiency was dragged down by farmers from the former Eastern Bloc economies. Pressure soon grew to revert to protectionist policies. Farmers and consumers alike attacked the icons of American corporate power.
Once you set up these big trading blocs, trade wars become almost inevitable. Because, let's face it, the whole point of Euro Federation is to create a market for Euro companies and Euro consumers to get the best deal. If strangers are allowed to enjoy the privileges, what's the point? So what's happened, and I have deep misgivings about this, is that we've dismantled national borders only to create regional barriers.
Out of the trade stalemate came a tragedy. In the confusion over restricted landing rights, an American jumbo on a flight from Detroit repeatedly asked for permission to land at Nice Airport, reporting a fault. That fact did not register with the air traffic controllers. The plane crashed, killing all 600 passengers and crew on board. It was an accident, but its circumstances only added to the atmosphere of mistrust.
It was an emergency, for Christ's sake. That was obvious. What sort of people could do this? We won't forget what's been done here. Never.
The trade issue that continued to dominate all others, however, was energy. The Second Gulf War had precipitated a scramble for oil supplies. The ruined Middle East fields could no longer meet the demands of the developed economies. Oil prices soared. The expanding Euro Federation was forced to seek out new sources. Some of the world's largest oil reserves were to be found in Siberia. By 2010, both Eurofed and Japan had extensive oil interests in the region. The capital costs were massive. Moscow allowed Berlin to buy a major stake in its biggest operation. And the Japanese, already developing oil fields in Mongolia, made similar deals with rebel republics in eastern Siberia. Since most of the oil reserves in Siberia were located in the east, this gave Japan the lion's share. The European Federation was left with insufficient supplies for its energy requirements. Then geologists in the Euro Federation Energy Ministry made the discovery that substantial oil deposits could be found in the Arctic Ocean north of Siberia. Under long-standing international agreements, the Arctic was out of bounds for commercial operations. Exploitation of its natural resources was clearly prohibited. The only vessels allowed in the area were for scientific surveys. Then an American satellite in regular orbit to monitor the Northern Hemisphere developed an unexplained transmission fault.
Okay, this is site reporter downlink. Question on the downlink. We're checking it.
The fault occurred each time it passed over the same spot in the Arctic region. The North American Union dispatched a reconnaissance plane to fly over the area to take pictures. It was intercepted by Eurofed fighters and forced to turn back. The results of the North American reconnaissance photographs proved startling. Posing as a Russian scientific expedition, the ships photographed by the spy plane were in fact fully operational drilling platforms. They belonged to the energy conglomerate Gas Europa. In Berlin, an immediate government inquiry was instigated. It found that top civil servants at Eurofed's energy ministry had been supplying drilling licenses to Gas Europa behind the backs of ministers. The scandal rocked the European government. James Milner, a believer in collective government responsibility, resigned his ministerial post as a matter of principle.
Have you got any statement at all, Mr. Milner? Obviously not.
He returned to the backbenches.
I was appalled. So were other members of the cabinet. Here was a major government contractor breaking every rule in the book, drawing down the wrath of the international community on our head, and the first we know of it is seeing it on television.
Now, you have to remember that Gas Europa had spent billions on developing its Arctic field, and quite properly expected a fair return on that investment in any agreed share-out. But, of course, the Japanese saw this as an opportunity to barter with us over other disputed claims in Siberia. And as for the Americans, well, all they wanted to do was to reduce their agreed pollution targets. Well, that simply wasn't on.
At the height of this crisis, another event was to fuel an already inflamed situation. In Berlin, the Eurofed president, Manfred Baumler, had been attending a church service. The assassination stunned the peoples of Europe. The motive was unclear. The gunman claimed to be an Azeri refugee, but it was a false identity. Investigation proved he'd spent his student years in North America. President Baumler was buried with full state honors in an atmosphere rife with conspiracy theories, most of them involving the North American Union. A sharply worded message from Washington to Eurofed leaders at the funeral only heightened the antagonism. Washington demanded the shutdown of the Gas Europa operation in the Arctic. Berlin moved immediately to protect its operations in the Arctic. A special forces unit was ordered into the region. America, in turn, responded by alerting its naval and marine task forces to move into the area. But already Euro troops had secretly landed in sympathetic northern Quebec to secure all naval approaches to the Arctic. The American president saw the landing as a European incursion.
Europa no debe hacer la equivocación de pensar que van a hacer lo mismo que los conquistadores hicieron 5 siglos atrás. La gente norteamericana no van a permitir ser colonizados por segunda vez por los opresores imperialistas.
Well, I think the Americans, as so often, have utterly overreacted. The fact is, we've always had a presence in Quebec. They are French, after all, with strong ties to Europe, and we naturally fear that the Americans will consider them a target in the present crisis. So, no, I don't think we've been provocative at all. We're simply being prudent.
Eurofed and American forces have now moved into position in the Arctic. The Americans have issued a final ultimatum demanding complete withdrawal of Eurofed forces from Arctic waters. If they remain, a confrontation is inevitable. The deployment of troops is being debated in emergency session by Eurofed MPs. In Berlin, several senior figures are expected to vote against the government.
Yes, I have to admit it. I am disillusioned. You see, what was appealing to me about the idea of Europe was not the drab attraction of harmonization, but a vision of escape from an introverted little island to something bigger, more diverse, more challenging and dynamic. Instead, what we've got is a sort of lackluster conformity, ruled over by an unchallenged government with so much power. It often doesn't know which hand is doing what. And now they want to lead us into a suicidal war. So, the Reichstag tomorrow, I shall vote against the government on the no-confidence motion. Although, to be honest, I'm not sure if it's too late to stop this thing now.
In an address to the Federation this evening, the European President warned the people of Europe not to expect much from his scheduled 11th-hour talks with President González. The present crisis, he added, underlined the grave dangers of a tripolar world.
Well, bad as things are right now, I think you must ask yourself, would they be any better if we had all gone our separate ways rather than integrating? Well, I'm not sure we'd even be here to talk about it, so in that sense, no, I have no regrets over Eurofederation. I suppose what does sadden me is that, having got rid of one Cold War, we seem to have created another, based this time not around ideology, but perhaps more brutally around who's going to get what pickings.
The European government has lost the vote of no confidence in the Reichstag. The Federation now faces the most serious constitutional crisis in its 11-year history. The ultimatum issued by the North American Union has now just 12 hours to run. The European Federation is on full alert.
And Europe on the Brink is reviewed in Did You See on Sunday evening at 9:20.